Welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art.
All right, welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art. Today, we're going to be answering a few questions, some questions that have come in through YouTube. Also, Todd, are you ready for TCW this week?
I am. What's going on, guys? We start TCW tomorrow night at 5:30 to be exact.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I don't know if you knew this, Todd, but this is the exact same time 11 years ago that I was a student at TCW.
The same date frame?
Same dates.
Oh, shit.
Same exact dates. Oh, I mean, it's like 1 or 2 days difference, but it was.
How many students were in that group?
We had like 48, I think, something crazy like that.
Yeah, we have a smaller group. I think we have just under 30.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I like it when it's smaller.
Me too. It's very intimate.
And it gives us a little more flexibility. We can double up on some stuff. And the people, I think about how much time you get with the pack walk with Cesar in the morning, with 7 people as opposed to, 12 or 15 people. So that's a pretty good experience.
And I mean, not that it's ever rushed because we always make it work, even if we did have 50 people.
Right.
But I think we could just like slow down a little bit and just enjoy the moment with the students. And it's going to be awesome. I'm really excited. There's some familiar faces.
I think, either, just like you said, it's the experience is pretty much going to be the same if there's 15 people, if there's 30 people, if there's 40 people. I remember one time this was both an honor and interesting. I did a TCW just with Cesar. It was just me and him. It was in the winter time, and it was a small group. It was like 12 students.
Oh, it was like the one with vets or something like that, veterinarians?
No, it was a regular TCW 2. It was the regular one that we do, but that we only had, I forget what it was. It was like 12 or 14 students. It was no more than 15 students. And so just him and I did it.
I didn't know that.
I forget what the format was. So in the morning time when we do those groups back and forth.
Yeah.
Like he God, I forget how we did it, but we ended up giving them, like, they would double up in the morning time. Like they would go to him, I had a group, and then the next day there was a swap, and then we did 2 other things, and then it was a swap. And so all the real world stuff I had to come up with.
That's awesome.
And every one of them, I had to come up with how to put the people in the place for the real, like the Chinese garden and everyone. I had to come up with everything.
The Zen garden now. It's called the Zen garden now.
Zen garden. Yeah, but that was the cool for me. That was like, oh, dude, I'm doing a workshop with Cesar. This is cool ass shit.
Yeah, I didn't know that, dude. Like maybe it was like like there wasn't enough like people to register or what?
It wasn't. I don't remember the reasoning, but it was a super small group, and they didn't want to bring on another trainer. I think it was like 2016, 2017, maybe no later than that. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's get into some of the questions that we've got.
So that's the episode today. We're going to answer some questions. We're going to, we'll break down some of what you're asking us, add a couple of things from the week. So what do you got, Art?
All right. So this one comes from on YouTube. It actually came from episode 5, which was when Lynn was around. It comes from Andrew Lockwood. He's like, I would love to understand more about Lynn saying you don't use corrections anymore. Do you mean globally in every situation, even in a dog simply chewing on something it shouldn't, or do you mean in extreme cases of when a dog has human or dog aggression? I feel like you mean the extreme cases where you need to understand the dog and listen to it, but in day-to-day situations, do you correct the dog, which is just communication anyway? So Lynn is not here to answer that question, but if that question was directed to me, and I did have a conversation about this specific thing to Lynn a couple of weeks ago, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the reason for that is because I just got done did my workshop in California. And people, the question we always get is, are you a reward-based trainer or are you a balance trainer? There's all these labels people like to use, right? But what if I'm neither? Like, what if we're neither? And, and it's not that I'm opposed to corrections.
You're non-binary trainer?
I'm just non-labeled trainer.
Non-labeled trainer.
All right. Okay. And so, like, why does it have to be either? Why does it have to be correction? Why does it be correction only? Why or reward based or even balance? Like, it's a little bit of both, And so, and I think that's when Lynn had left and I made the episodes by myself, and one of the things that I said is that, I wish that I would have gotten the experience that you did, Todd, early on, like the packs, like how amazing that would have been just to experience that. Like I didn't get any of that stuff, I wish I had that, and I'll never get that experience. But what I did get the experience was Lynn in a different way. And I kind of feel when Canyon passed away, when Lynn went off to be by himself, like he kind of like in a weird way discovered himself. Right now, I'm going to, when I had Lynn come out, I had this dog that extremely dog aggressive, extremely human aggressive. Like for the first time ever, it was an Anatolian Shepherd. Okay. Big dog. For the first time in a long time, I was actually scared of this dog. And I was like, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel comfortable with this dog. And so
that takes, it sounds easy. That takes a lot, to at some point in this job, sometimes it's like you feel like you have to step into situations.
Yeah. And so when I talked to the client, I was like, look, I don't feel really comfortable doing this. And this was the first time I had turned someone away from social, because I was like, your dog will be fine. I've seen literally thousands of dogs come in our social, and, and they always we were able to handle it. But this day, this dog was serious, like serious. He was on a muzzle. He was in the back of a Ford Bronco, smashing the window with the muzzle as I'm just standing outside, just boom, boom, boom. And I was like, oh, wow. And I was like, just go and get him out. Just get him out. And he's like lunging at me, right? And I said, just tether him to the runner of the car. And he is like going to the end of the leash. And I'm waiting for him. He'll get tired. He'll calm down. Nope, he was not. And I was like, oh, just waiting for him to settle, and then, get some curiosity. He wasn't even curious. He's a protection dog. That's what he was bred to do. And
hey, can you break that down? That's a pretty important thing, right? So if you don't have this like innate ability to always feel everything in your organs like Cesar does, a lot of this is we're looking at the situation to say, how does this dog feel? And when you said he wasn't curious, so what does that mean?
Yeah, because sometimes like I always wait for the moment. I don't rush in right away. I wait for the dog to like, okay, this is not normal, in the sense of like they can lunge, they can do all these things, but after a while they're just like, okay, this isn't really working for me. What if I become curious? So I wait for them to use their nose, right?
Yeah.
They're like, they stop, and then they turn away or they walk away. I wait for that moment, right? And I was like, okay, it doesn't mean that they've accepted me. It just means that they've changed slightly how they see me. This dog was not changing. He was not curious. He had a mission, and that was to protect this Ford Bronco, to protect the owner that was there. And because that is what an Anatolian Shepherd does. They protect the livestock, So he was just not letting up. And I said, you know what? Let me think about some things, but he can't come into social. So I called Lynn. I was like, hey, I got this client that I think would be really good, but I want to watch it. I want to be a part of it. And he's like, of course. So I talked to the owner. They agreed to bring Lynn down for 5 days. And Lynn did the immersion where he goes down for 5 days. And I got to watch it. And on the first day, the dog is in a crate, and Lynn does this whole thing where he kind of goes with the crate, all the stuff, but also again, I'm not speaking for Lynn, but this is just my interpretation of what I saw.
Yeah.
He's in the crate. It's one of those like airline crates. So it's like kind of covered all the way around, but it just has the cage or whatever in the front. And so Lynn is kind of there, and he's kind of like allowing the dog, and he kind of surrounds this crate, almost like stands there, like squats down on his side, and he's waiting for him to like settle. And he's not settling. And he kind of open, close, doing back and forth. And so then the dog is not really like kind of settling either. And I don't know, something happened where the housekeeper had to come in and clean the room, and like, it just changed everything. And I was like, okay, this is very inconvenient that these people decide just to come in, so it changed everything. And I think Lynn ended up getting the dog outside, or had the owner like just put the dog outside. And so we put the dog outside, and Lynn's on the opposite side of the door, and he is like, this dog is
was that because the situation changed?
Yes.
Or you felt it was better to do outside or rather than from inside the crate?
It was both, because now the people were inside. He couldn't in this room, and he couldn't do what he needed to do in the room because they were in there cleaning, and to protect them, he's like, okay, let's just change the scenario. So he put the dog outside. The dog is at the door, and Lynn's just kind of at the door, opening and closing, going back and forth. And there's this whole process.
I saw just a moment of the video way back in the day when you showed that. I only saw a small, very snippet, but I saw that part. So as you're talking about this story, that's what I'm picturing. So
and this dog's off muzzle too at this point, right? And so then he opens the door, and then there's like two doors. There's one, it's like an L shape, and there's one on one side, and there's another door on the other side. And so he is opening and closing the door, and the dog's like lunging. And so as soon as the dog would move away, he opens the door, and the dog turns around, and then it moves forward, and then he shuts the door. So he's mentally like, what he's trying to do to the dog at this moment is like, because the dog wants the door to be open, but Lynn is changing the association of how again, this is my perception of what Lynn was doing. It was the dog is moving away, then the door opens. So he's giving the dog what he wants by changing what the dog does, and the action changes also. So, but also Lynn's trying to guide the dog for what he wants him to do. Anyways, long story short, he ends up going outside with the dog, and the dog is like, at this point has kind of settled, and Lynn gets a leash, puts it on, a slip lead, puts it on. He puts two of them on. And he puts one to put on the floor so he can step on it. So if the dog moves forward, he doesn't move forward. A little technique I learned from him as well. But what was important is like how he said.
And so, I don't want to give interpretation. Is that so the pressure is the dog has control of that particular pressure, it thinks, and it's not coming from the human? Is that why he does the leash on the ground? So the dog doesn't interpret the pressure being applied as coming from the human?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously.
What are you doing with the other leash? Are you holding it in your hand?
He's holding it, yeah.
And I think, is he using the leash to just guide, but not apply pressure?
Yes and no. This is where it gets confusing.
That's fine.
This is where it gets confusing.
Okay. You don't have to try to get super clear. I'm just trying to I am trying to generalize a little bit. Like I can do a lot of, play this out a little bit, but I'm understanding why the leash is on the ground. I mean, that's smart.
Yeah.
And that it would detach certain types of, if this is in fact the motivation, is detach certain types of pressure from him, but just the guy.
I think the reason why he did it, because he would step on it because he had one in his hand, one on the floor. If the dog happened to move forward, all you have to do is pull up on the leash to stop the forward motion. So if you think about it, what happens is it brings the dog backwards in a way, right?
Yeah, like this, and if the weight's out here, then it pulls back. I could picture it. It's like,
and so what happened was, and this is from a dog that was just going crazy, and at this point he hasn't touched the dog, like he hasn't gone out and like given a correction or anything like that. He just and one thing that he always says is like, don't make the dog wrong. Right? He's like, he's misunderstood. Like I want him to express himself, and I hope he expresses himself because I want to know. Like he'll say things like that, and so he'll say like, I hope that he releases his frustration on me so I can understand him better. Like he does all these things, and so then he gets the dog. He brings Romeo, so he has the leash, right? And he brings him around to the side, and he says something like, "All right, Romeo, I'm going to touch you. I'm going to, I don't know the exact thing he said, but it's like, I'm going to slow you down here, and he touches him. And all of a sudden the dog is like, oh, I don't know what's going on here, because usually like I don't get this close to people. And then now you're starting to see a little bit. Last week we talked about that sensitivity. We're starting to see the sensitivity of the dog, but you would have never seen it because you weren't able to get close to him at this moment. Right. And he goes, all right, let's go on a walk. And I was like, all right, cool, let's go. And so we're walking, and I'm just walking with them, walk around to this park, and all of a sudden this dog just like melts into him. I'm just like, what in the world just happened? And so going back to what I was talking about, like he didn't offer food.
Yeah.
He didn't offer a physical correction. He just took the time, said, you want to express yourself? Go right ahead. I'm not going to make you wrong for it. You did it. But I'm also not going to, I want you to understand that between you and me, like, I don't want this to happen either, And so.
Well, and also having the true confidence to back up whatever the dog gives you. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I bet if you were to ask Lynn, at any moment, was there a fear or a nervousness of what the dog could do to you?
I did ask him that question.
Okay,
He
what
said,
did he say?
absolutely not.
There you go. So
he said no. And you know, Lynn,
yeah,
he's not scared of those situations at all. Like,
nope.
I mean, there's even Cesar has said that. Cesar said he's fearless.
Yep.
In those situations. And I think that's the one like big compliment that Cesar's given Lynn is like, he's fearless.
I can't say the same. And
No.
I think that's that's the separation. That is definitely the separation of in a lot of ways. And I don't think you necessarily have to have his level of knowledge and experience to succeed in certain situations. If there's that utter, complete, total fearlessness, no matter what the situation can give to you. I think I think it's kind of rare.
Yeah.
But he definitely has it.
Yeah. So it was really cool because he was able to just really reach this dog, and even then how he was able to communicate to the owners was also really cool. But again, he didn't offer food. He didn't offer a correction. He just took his time and just used pressure. And that was the thing that Lynn said. He's like, it's pressure. He calls it the pressure exchange. I really want to get Lynn on here so we can talk about not even this particular situation, but what he calls the pressure exchange. He has this whole pressure matrix thing, which is very, he guards this thing, but I'd rather it come from him so that he can give it out. So I definitely want to get Lynn on an episode to kind of talk about that. But to answer Andrew's question, that is what we mean. Now, there are times, me personally, like I just had a dog chewing on one of the beds outside, and I was like, hey, that's a correction too. It's like, stop what you're doing and do something else. So I think that's where it comes in, because corrections mean different things to different people. And so corrections could be physical, could be psychological. There's different forms of corrections, right? And so, but I think in the generic terms is like it's being a physical, like a leash pop, touching with the hand, I think that's what people see as a correction. So to answer Andrew's question, I do it if I disagree with something, on the low level, absolutely, of course, I'm going to disagree with certain things. I just think but in the physical aspect of a physical correction, I have not seen Lynn do it. So
that's like you said, it's almost like reinvented what he knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. The time I got with him was, we've talked about it, was priceless.
Yeah.
For countless reasons. There's, a million little flashes in my head I have of the time, but to talk about pressure, right? So this was my first true introduction to it. I've talked about it. He called it fishing. Mm-hmm. And we would get all the dogs in an area, and he knew how to get them moving, and fishing mean like a school of fish in one direction. And then he could stop it and get them going in the other direction. Now, the ability to see that and watch it, not just once, we did it for a spell as part of the morning exercises, part after the pack walk, and giving a little bit of playtime, he would take a certain group off and do that. And it's like crazy to be able to see that and think about it. And not only that, just understanding the order of, how you're taking dogs through their day. He had the facility at that time. And so I would meet him in the morning and do a pack walk, and then go back to the facility, and then go through the day and go to appointments. It was a little bit of everything, right? So I could see appointments. I watched him bring dogs into the pack. I watched when it was time for a dog he was rehabilitating to come into the pack. Mm-hmm. Lots of little things where, moving into a dog that has a bite history. I remember there was a dog laying on the ground, and what was its name? It was like a black labby mix or something, and I think it was the dog of somebody who was helping him put some fence in or something. And it was laying down. He goes, "Go move that dog." Like, knowing that if you don't do it right, it's going to bite you, and like how to get in and use a little bit, get in and put pressure, just the pressure, and get it to move. And and then you're feeling pressure from him, and that understanding pressure and the variations of pressure. And I think too, when when you break yourself down psychologically, you have to understand how you respond to pressure, how much you can take, where it comes from. There's something called locus of control, which is essentially where do you feel your pressure to, to do something. It's an internal locus of control, which means you're internally motivated, or external locus, right? You're motivated by outside sources. To me, embarrassment is pressure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so all of these different forms of pressure, fear is pressure on yourself. So understanding how you respond to pressure will be how you're able to use pressure effectively or not. And that's why that to me, that question of, how did he feel? I know where my line is. It's behind that dog.
Yeah.
It's over here.
I will say that I changed when I had kids. That started to change because you want to come home, in one piece to your dog. So I'm just like, I'm not gonna touch that dog.
Well, it also, your environmental home life changes in the way you can bring dogs in, because I always had, the way I had it set up is that you had to get through 2 doors before you could get into where a dog would be. So it was easy for me to have a better chance of blocking it off. And again, if you want to go to pressure, as a parent, the pressure on you changes.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is where he had different ways of explaining it back then, but he was still talking about pressure. It was not quite, how he has it now, but he was always talking about, I have it. You should see where I have it written down. It's still from the notebook. I should bring the notebook on and show it.
The notebook.
So I hope that answered your question. What was the name of the guy who asked the question?
Andrew Lockwood.
There you go. So what's another question?
This is actually it's not a question. But I want to throw it out there. KP.
Hope we represented you well there, Lynn.
Lynn needs his own show. That's what someone else commented. Okay. Next
Agreed.
one from Joyful Canine Services. She's a fan of the show. Do you think you could have rehabbed the dog you chose to euthanize and what you know now? Or do you think she was a true poor genetic behavioral case? Great podcast topic. I've considered getting a large stuffed dog. I bring real dogs and fences, etc. I was always unsure of this method. So I think she's asking me because I talked about in the last episode about having to put down a dog. Now, I didn't choose to put her down. That was actually the rescue's decision. I just gave them the option of like, hey, by the way, like we've tried for over a year, like trying to get into her home. I've worked with people. It hasn't worked out. They decided, they made that decision. But do I think I could have changed from what I know now? No, because at that moment, I was probably the peak of like working with those dogs. Like I did get her to a point. I did rehab her to a certain point, but maintaining those things, which we'll go into another question we have later on, with certain things is because it's in the details, right? It's noticing the details before they escalate. People forget or miss the small details and they escalate to something. So, just like if someone were to go into drug rehab, right? And you have a family member that goes into drug rehab, you have to see all the little signs, the little details, because I've known people who had family members that are drug dealers, drug users, addicts, and they're like, I had no idea. They were there. The signs were there. They were just kind of blindly seeing them, right? So same thing with the dog is like, there was a lot of little details because she was so quiet. And, there was a lot of things that would lead up to the attack that if you miss those things, and most people will.
Yep. Silence is easy to miss.
Yeah, it's the vocal ones that you're more aware of. This was a quiet one, right? So I don't think like things would have changed. I got to a point. I didn't feel comfortable leaving her alone with my employees or people there because again, they were going to miss little things,
Well, and this is always a topic that it's so heavily emotional that it's always going to bring out angles that don't take enough variables, I think, into play, right? So not every situation, to me, I've always kind of looked at it like we have to separate a couple things. Can I help this dog? Most likely. If it was me in an environment that I had complete control of, could we make this a situation that was doable, right? That we could all peacefully coexist? Yeah. Now now let's add other things. Okay. So now let's add a wife that maybe doesn't agree exactly like I agree, right? That maybe wants to do things at a different time than I do. And then maybe let's add a kid. So now if there's a miss of that little cue that you said, it's not just a dog getting tagged, maybe it's a child. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's so many variables, and it's after so many years in this, the part that I wish people understood is there are situations where there's simply no other choice.
Mm.
And for various reasons. And I don't think anybody necessarily needs to be able to explain exactly those reasons, because like I said, it could depend on your situation. And there's not typically a cavalry out there looking to take dogs that have bit 5 people, and off the dog. So, what choice is there? And then you get these people that finally make the difficult choice and then get pulverized, or some, no, there's, there's like, oh, there's always people that can save them. And it's like, yes, it's almost like what I said at the end of the last episode. There's reality, and then there's this idealist perfect situation. And I think almost all dogs can change under the right circumstances. But if those circumstances aren't there, at what point do you keep a dog in a situation where something negative, really negative, can happen and risk the humans over the dog? Right? Altruism has a price. And, I'm kind of going through this. So I this dog, this Frenchie that I have, I helped a client with, it's just not a fit. And so she's, when I'm leaving tomorrow, she's staying with another friend of mine for a couple of weeks, but she has this thing about space.
Frenchies.
You know what I mean, dude? There's a couple of things that really, and it's been perpetual. I mean, I have a sweet spot for a couple of weeks, and then a situation will get just a little bit off, and you'll see it, and then I'll have a sweet spot for a little while. The other morning, she busted out of the pen. The first time, I've had her for quite some time, busted out because one of the other little dogs that I have, the older dog I have, started to walk up to it. It was early in the morning. And I'm in the shower and I hear this screaming, and she had jumped out and grabbed her by the head. Right. So the altruism is I almost lose one dog, by helping and saving another, so to speak. So there's always this payout. And that's the hardest part about this is being able to be super emotional and have that connection, but also have a practical side of going, hey, what, like you said, you took it as far as you could and you said, what can we do?
You're right.
So sometimes I don't want to have the conversation of, could I go back and make it better? I don't know, we do that in our sleep sometimes, but it can take you down a mean path. And you can be really hard on yourself. I mean, we've all had to deal with it. We've all had to deal with the ones that we couldn't win.
I think also, you remember Holly from the DPC? She was on the show on Dog Whisperer, and she bit Cesar. And I think what people need to understand also is that the rehab that was done on Holly was Cesar figuring out how to feed her so that no one would get bit, right? Because if you fed her a certain way, you were more than likely going to get bit. And so it's also changing the environment is part of the rehab. So that's why Cesar brought her, because she was great with the dogs. She was, part of, his pack that lived at the DPC. And, he was able to rehab her in a way that said, we can all feed her this way, but don't do it this way because we know what can happen. And so I think that is a part of the job that I think people don't realize, that you can't sometimes go back to the way you were doing. I think that's the misconception of rehab, is like, you can feed the event of feeding, but you may not be able to do it in the way that you used to do it. You have to do it differently. That makes sense?
Absolutely. I think unconsciously the concept most people have of a rehab or a board and train is there's elements of you're a car. And what we're going to do is we're going to tinker with the parts and give you some new tires and change the fluids, and you're going to get this thing back, right? That kind of now is going to run for a while. It's behavior, I do believe, to be mechanical. I've said that over and over again, but the connection to the human, that's not. Do you know what I mean? And so I think people on some unconscious level, I do believe they think that's happening. And if we all threw all our emails on the table right now, you can hear it in the tones of the way people ask questions and the way they're like, hey, I'm going away for 2 weeks. And then they'll throw, this is what I want. I want the car painted red, and I want the windows tinted, and will it be ready for me to pick up when I get back?
Yeah.
And so I think whatever it is culturally or just the human side of people, we see our dogs as to be trained. And I mean, to go back to what Lynn did, Lynn wasn't trying to train that dog. Lynn knew he had to connect to it on the most fundamental of level. He communicated in the language of animals, which is pressure. You can see a cat and a dog, a bird and a squirrel. They all use pressure to communicate with each other. So he's a fucking animal in that sense, and he knows how to go in and do it. And that's,
Yeah, I know. All right, let's go. This is also from Joyful Canine Services. What are the main reasons you test for sensitivity? Why so focused on it? I almost think it's similar to motivation and triggers. Do you test it so you know how to motivate the dog either by corrections or rewards, or just to assess the temperament and softness of the dog?
I don't test for it.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's something you recognize.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's something that I'm going to see as. So I think for me, I always go back to, okay, what am I trying to accomplish with this dog? Okay, so now I have, whatever it may be, and you assess the dog. How can I assess this dog? How does this dog feel? What is this dog like? How do me and this dog connect? And it kind of helps you know what you're going to get from it, right? So being able to see a dog's sensitivity allows you to know how to connect with it, because it's going to be different. That dog's going to connect to you different than it's going to connect to me, Art. It's going to connect different to whoever the person in Joyful Canine Services is. It might connect better or worse. And, if from that point you meet the dog, you're trying to take it on a walk, it's going to help me understand what's the best way. Maybe I want the dog to have another couple of feet and teach it to walk with me from further away because it's really sensitive. Maybe I need to bring it closer and help it, stay in a smaller space because of whatever the energy would be. So that's how I use it. I don't particularly test for it, but it is definitely something that's present that I assess. You?
And yeah, well, the next part of that was why so focused on it. I want to share a story. I was at Sherry's ranch several years ago. I took some employees up there, and I was just kind of hanging out, and they were working with this Great Dane, and this dog was reactive to other dogs. My employees were kind of struggling with activity, but I noticed that when the dog was like on play or something like that, someone was bringing out the trash cans, the roll-out trash cans. And I noticed the dog did this, like, what is that sound, And I was like, ooh, the dog's sensitive to that sound. I said, hey, let's, I was like, can we pause real quick? And I kind of talked to the employees and I talked to Sharon. I was like, hey, I have an idea what I want to do here, but it has to be like timing has to be done perfectly. And so put the dog away, brought the trash can out on this deck that she has. And I have it on video too, actually. I've never published it, never put it out, but video. And basically bring the trash can out, dog comes back out. We start working through it and then bring a dog out. The minute that the dog starts to get reactive, I just roll the trash can and the dog was like, what the heck was that? So that's a sensitivity that I'm using to my advantage. So the dog has a different interpretation or association with what I'm about to do. So it's putting a pause of what you're doing. It says, don't do that. Be here with me. Stay here with me, right? So then you do that over and over. Then you take the trash can away. Then you bring the dog out. Then you're like, hey, don't do that. And then you can start injecting your inner what's the word I'm looking for? Injecting yourself, adding yourself to the mix, right? So you have the sensitivity of the trash can and yourself. You're like, hey, you can add a sound to associate the trash can to the, sometimes we go, shh. So the trash can comes in, the sound of the shh comes in. So now they put those two and two together. So then you take the trash can away and now you just have that shh sound and it means the exact same thing. So you can take that wherever you go.
Well, but think about, so sensitivity though is across the spectrum. So it depends on where you're coming from. That's why I said it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, in your case, sensitivity, you're talking about, I talked before about the brain. So where really the sensitivity is, you get an excited forward moving dog like you're describing right there. The more sensitive they are to stopping, essentially it's if you want to call it easier. And so making a sound that stops, it's fantastic. But the sensitivity of trying to connect with a dog moving away is totally different, And so it's understanding how that sensitivity is plays into what you're doing. And that's where I think you can see people struggle, is because they don't understand when to bring a dog close versus when to stop them from going forward. And that's where the sensitivity highly comes into play, because oftentimes the same person can't do both the same. Mm-hmm. So you know what I mean? If you're able to tap into the sensitivity of the dog that's always moving forward, most of those trainers I've seen struggle with the sensitivity of the dogs that want to move away. Mm-hmm. So it depends on what sensitivity you're trying to, like what end of the spectrum you're looking at for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Total sense. All right. So I have another question from Andrew Lockwood. Andrew says, this was from episode 30, assessment with a video breakdown. This is from last week. This is my favorite podcast. I want to ask you guys something. I'm early stages of my career as a dog behaviorist in South Africa. And one of the most common things I help people with is socializing their dogs who were attacked by dogs when they were a puppy. This is a good topic, by the way. What tends to happen in people is people want to socialize. By the way, the letters are really small, so I'm like squinting. So bear with me. I'm trying to zoom in, but I can't zoom in anymore. What tends to happen is people want to socialize their puppies and end up taking them to dog parks and on short walks and let their puppy interact with every dog it sees. What I've noticed is people don't seem to know how to assess a dog or group of dogs, this is true, in a dog park to see if it would be safe to socialize there. I would love to know your opinions on the best way to socialize a puppy to dogs. Also, how to assess the energy of dogs at a dog park before going in to ensure that your dog or puppy have a safe socialization there. It's a good question, by the way.
All right. So there's a lot of little layers to that.
Yes.
So to me, let's go to an ideal situation. If you were to have a young puppy, you want to, it's like a big extended family. Ideally, I'd like to have a situation where I have a couple other puppies that puppies age, a couple of adolescent dogs, a couple of adult dogs, a couple of senior dogs, because you're going to, get different lessons through different temperaments. I've always liked to use my dogs for puppy owners, like when they get puppies early, because I like to show that, okay, so let's pretend my dogs are your family. I'm going to bring out dogs and I'm going to, explain the different temperaments of my dogs and why you're going to get a different reaction with each dog. And it helps people see why the dog's not going to act the same with each member of the family. And so to me, socializing a puppy to give them the balance of experiences, you have to give them a balance of experience. Mm-hmm. And we tend to only socialize puppies with either only other puppies. And so a strong puppy around other puppies becomes a prick, but a strong puppy around a balanced groups of dog, they find their place in there because there's a good spot for them somewhere, right? They need to be a sidekick with somebody. They've got a place, but if they're only around puppies, they can become pretty difficult because it's almost like an inadvertent sense of self, So to me, it's always that balancing act. I think early interpretation of knowing if the puppy is having an accepting experience is understanding if they're moving to it or away from it, right? So if you take a puppy into a situation, the only thing they want to do is run away. That's not socialization. That is teaching the puppy to have avoidance or flight behaviors around other dogs. So it's important to see what socialization is, which is to get your puppy in a calm surrender or happy-go-lucky state, which is dog that's calm and relaxed or dog that's playful and respectful. And if you're in that mind frame, you're socializing your puppy beneficially. Yeah. Now, once your puppy goes into nervous states or excited states that can go into just from pouncing to reactivity, if you don't either place limits on this and let this happen intentionally, but regulate it and then stop it, or always make sure your puppy that moved away was able to come back closer. And this is by using, various motivations. That can be as various as, the conversation of the whole podcast, and then getting them back more. And what the sweet spot is, if you want to say you're scarring them, at the very least, you're conditioning them. So if every time your dog sees another dog and wants to move away, and that's how it ends, that conditioning is going to continue. And at the very least is going to lead to a dog that can't get near other dogs. And if another dog does get near it, oftentimes they'll go into a defensive state. And then I think the opposite side that creates so many issues is when dogs have overexcited or stimulated experiences as puppies and nobody regulates it. And then they become like overabundant with energy. And it's just like having that, that friend that's like that. Nobody likes that around. And so it creates a lot of problems. And a lot of dogs don't go into dog parks and end up going in aggressive. They go in excited or scared and end up having things happen to them because of that energy. And then they get stuck thinking they have to play defense or offense due to the experience. They become that would defensive. Be how I would talk about it.
Yeah, I see this all the time, by the way. And when I go into clients' houses and they have a dog that's reactive, and I was like, has it always been like this? And they're like, no, like, well, what happened? They're like, what do you mean? I was like, has your dog ever been, I was asked, has your dog ever been attacked in a dog park or something? Yeah, they have. Did it happen after that? Yeah, now you think about it. Yeah, that's what happened. I was like, so what happened? So, we went to a dog park and got attacked to the dogs. And then usually the common thing is like the humans are yelling at each other, get your effing dog out.
Yeah.
And so the humans are fighting, the dogs are fighting, they finally separate. And so now they've separated the dogs when they're in that state, right? And so it's all, so now when anytime that dog that was attacked is around a dog or sees another dog, it feels the need to defend itself. Go away. You see that in barking, lunging, all these things, because it wants the dogs to go away, because the last time that it was
Do
around.
you know how I explain? Do you know how I explain this one? So
No.
like I love the analogies. I go, usually, we have clients that are dating or married. I go, you ever been in a fight with your wife, your husband? Like, yeah. I go, so if you get in a really bad fight and you guys just storm out the door, how do you feel when you guys come back in and see each other?
Same.
You know what I mean? I go, and it's so easy to just get popped off right at that moment. I go, and after a few times, I go, you can like hear the voice and be like, motherfucker, it's like, it gets to where the layers, and that's how I explain why we must resolve those things. Like if you don't resolve it before you walk away, the brain stays stuck in that easily triggered mindset. And it can happen once. It can happen once or twice. And that's it. That's all it takes for the brain to get stuck in that.
Yeah. And so I even, it's important that moment, once it's happened, what you do after is probably the most important part. But no one's going to take the time and like, all right, let's wait till they all calm down and get them next. Let's start and put them on a leash and start walking. No one's going to do those things, but those things that need to happen.
Let me ask you, have you been in the park when it's happened, and what do? Have you actually been in a dog park when shit goes down and had to step in and make it right?
Oh, I don't step in at all.
Yeah.
I'm hands off.
Yeah, but I don't take my dog, so I never have to worry about stepping in.
Yeah. I take my dogs, but they're pretty happy-go-lucky dogs. And by the way, dog parks can be good if they're like all happy-go-luckies and they're all having the same energy, which is another part of the question, is like, how do you know to assess? Okay. But I just want to end this with one thought about, because when we have our socials, we'll have 40 dogs, and dogs are moving, everyone's moving, and I usually take the dogs off leash by the calmest ones first. And the ones that are like the most excited stay on leash longer, so kind of the energy goes down and they get in the flow, and then they come off, and then they understand what the flow is. You don't do that at dog parks, right? And so we've had some, not a lot, but we've had some incidents. And so usually what happens is we split them up, put them on leash, and we just walk together. And as soon as they're fine, I take the leashes off, and they're fine, right? Because we want to create the imprint that says, this is how I want to end it, not when you guys are going towards each other, And so that is how we, when we do our socials, that's one of the big things that we do. And like, I remember this one lady was like, you need to kick that dog out. I'm like, no, we're all in the same family here. We're doing this for the benefit of your dog and that dog, so that I don't want to create more problems for your dog or that dog. We're going to get this out of the way right now. And then she was kind of upset at me, but she kept coming after a while. I think she understood. But that was just the rule that I had.
You can't. Yeah. I mean, unless you're going to interpret it, I think, as proper as anybody's on if this is getting to the point where this dog needs to go. We're not going to make another couple $100 for me to put everybody at risk. But some people are sensitive to that, and you have to make that. I know you'd make that call, right? He asked about a dog getting attacked. Not too long ago, I had this experience. This is a real life experience that we hear all the time, but here's how it ended. So I'm on a walk. I've got Blueberry, my Shepherd Husky mix, and I stop and talk to a neighbor who's got 2 dogs with her. One of them is a younger puppy, like a 6-month-old lab, and another one's an older dog that doesn't like other dogs, but is kind of, we'll go back, sensitive about it, a little bit insecure about it. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to her, and we're just chatting. And then the lady didn't drop the leash, but the dog, I wasn't looking down. There must've been some eye contact or something. The dog just went and ran over and bit Blueberry, right? Just bit her. Didn't really get to do anything because I was right there. I reached down, I grabbed the leash of the dog that came in, and then I pulled up and put a little bit of pressure. And then I looked at the lady, I go, now you guys have to wait.
Yeah.
and I sat there, and we waited until that dog relaxed all the way down. Now, at the same time, Blueberry got to relax. So for me, in my mind, as soon as I'm in that situation, I'm not doing it for their dog, although their dog definitely benefits from that. I'm doing it for my dog.
Yeah.
Because just to the point you said is if you walk away when they're in that forward state, they're both going to get scarred by that area potentially and look for a fight in that exact area every day, or they can get nervous or defensive when they see a similar situation. So the next time I'm stopping and I'm talking to somebody with two dogs, there's a really good chance that she wouldn't let that happen if that situation would have ended with the lady's dog running over and biting her and the lady, and grabbing the leash and everybody, like you said, fighting and walking away. And then everybody's left in that state. Next time I see that person and their dogs, I'm going to be like, fucking, there's, the dogs will be too. I think people have to fight their initial feeling at that moment and they have to bite the bullet. Mm-hmm. You have to bite the bullet, take a breath, shut the fuck up, right? Talk with a good tone in your voice. Hey, all right. Now the people wanted to move away as fast as they could because all that pressure was on them.
Yeah.
That's what's funny is you can tell these people are so fidgety and nervous that I'm sitting here doing this and waiting.
Well, like you said earlier, embarrassment is pressure and they're embarrassed.
Yes. And I'm just like, nope. And then I don't make a deal about it. I just talk to them, but people don't often know how to go through that feeling. And especially I think as further along in society, the younger people, it's even harder. The whole thing about pressure now is even harder for younger people.
Yeah.
So that to me is an important element. What other aspects does he say about that? So the reading the dogs, how to socialize them, the best way to socialize them. He also said,
yeah, like socializing a puppy. And you kind of touch on it without, answering the question directly. You said, getting older dogs, mentor dogs, as I like to call, you don't want to get a bunch of puppies together. They always, I've noticed like a lot of people that offer like puppy socialization is just a bunch of puppies running amok. That is not a good way to do it because there's no mentor. Everyone needs an apprentice. Everyone needs, a mentor and apprentice. That's just, so the dogs that know how to do it, that's the dogs that you need to guide the younger dogs.
And by know how to do it, it doesn't mean that they're asses about it. It means that there's the perfect balance of allowing puppies to kind of learn by setting rules, boundaries, and limits that are easy for the puppies to figure out, not dogs that are just popping off at all these puppies for getting close at them. If you bring in a dog that's a bit aggressive, you can definitely make a matter worse. So there's a huge difference between a dog correcting puppies and a dog that's being kind of a clown about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like how to assess like dogs if going into a dog park. Honestly, I have a dog park here that's like a bar and it's the worst combination, but they have that here. I like to go and just sit outside and watch. That's how I teach some people because I can learn from other people's mistakes. But you're learning to read the energy and you can almost call out what's about to happen by what you see. And so, if I see a dog that's walking in that's bringing like pulling their owner high energy and the energy is already like high, that dog runs in and then it starts just running and then everyone starts chasing that dog. Now, the other end of that, you get a dog that's nervous that doesn't want to go in. They're like, come on, let's go socialize. We're going to have fun. And the dog's like, no, I don't want to go. You're forcing that dog to go into a situation. Then it attracts all the other dogs that are more high energy to, go in and investigate. But then the dog's like, I don't want to be here. I need to defend myself. And so they blame the sensitive dog, the ones the back of the pack. They blame that dog like, your dog's being aggressive. No, the dog is overwhelmed and it just feels the need to defend itself and no one is standing up for this dog.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's easy to see. I mean, it's easy to see that if you get and watch like 6 and 7-year-old kids at a playground, you see the same thing. You see some kid comes in that's acting a little spazzy and it sometimes creates separation. The kids move away. That to me, it's always like with the puppies, there's this nice formula where they'll come in and they're the right energy when they get close. And if they come in and it's a clash, that's excitement you need to regulate. If one comes in and chases the other one away all the time, then this one needs to be regulated and vice versa. But there's this perfect little symbiotic balance where that puppy's getting the best experience, right? Where sometimes they're chasing, sometimes they're being chased, sometimes they're nipping, sometimes the dog's nipping at them, but there's not a sense of overwhelmness or like where it shifts because the forward dogs shift out of play into control. And I think that's an important element for people to see is that puppies, the reason play exists is because it's teaching them social interactions or how to hunt or both. And so You know, it's natural for them to get to a certain level of excitement and then it turns to control, or a certain level of nervousness and then it turns to flight. And it's not necessarily the puppy's choice. It's just the experience you got them in. Just like you said, those nervous dogs that are like, I can't get out of this box anymore. All right, let's go. And more of that animal instinct kicks in. So they get out of the dog mind, go into animal mind, and all for self-preservation, you know. And the human thought they were doing right by socializing. That's why it's important to know what socializing is. Just taking your dog to a social experience isn't socializing. It's creating that sweet spot of where the dog's mind is at, that's socializing.
Yeah. And then I will add one last thing on that. At our socials, when we have a dog that's like kind of sensitive, kind of hanging on the fence, I usually put a long line on it, but I also don't let any other dog go and it's overexcited. I say, I'm asking that dog to move away. I want this dog to have its own space. It learns. I just want it to learn how to move because it's stuck on the fence. Get a long line. Come on, let's get it moving. Get it moving. I got all these dogs that are going to come to you, and then the dog's like, "Oh, you got it? Okay, then I don't have to worry about it." And then they just start moving. Then I take the leash off, and the dog, gets used to moving. All right,
that's hugely underestimated right there. That keeping that space safe, by the way, for introducing dogs, and then the recognizing, oh, you see that I need a little bit more space up here at first. Oh, appreciate that.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Well, because and you've mentioned this one time, is like the reason why dogs will attack another dog in the house is because the humans fail to recognize that there's a space issue, and if like you guys aren't recognizing it, I'm gonna make the decision to do it, and the way I do it is I use my mouth.
Yep.
So, all right, this next one comes from Kev Taylor, and it's actually from last week, but you had mentioned this in the last episode, like you made a comment. You'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay, from Kev Taylor. The funny thing is, it's about the one about the stuffed animal. Okay, episode on the stuffed animal. The funny thing is, after listening to you guys and loving it as always, I get home and turn on Dog Whisper, and there he is using a stuffed mechanical rabbit. For context, he was using it to create space and calm submissive behavior, and not as bait. And you mentioned this last week because you're like, there was no area where they were like trying to calm the dog down around those situations, and that is the huge difference between what the positive people do and what we do. Is like we're trying to get the dog to be more relaxed, calm around the thing that triggers them, right? And that is the one thing, is like it may look like the same thing, but it's not the same thing.
Not even close. Yeah.
Anything else to add to that?
It's the acceptance. It's the mind and acceptance, as I picture it's wide open, right? It's wide open. And if it's not an acceptance, it's not receiving anything. It's just repeating things. And the ability to create calmness is creating acceptance. In psychology, even in human psychology, they use those terms. So if you're not in an accepting state, that means your brain is kind of closed off and it can't receive information. So it's not unique to dogs. It's just that that's what we're playing from.
Yeah. Okay. This one is from a regular listener, Suzanne Olsen from, I think it's from Switzerland. She's somewhere in Europe. Okay. I have a question. Could you consider bringing up the subject of old dog and dementia on the podcast? This is my fourth dog with dementia, and I wonder how best I can support him when worries kick in. They have been different, but the female became beyond worried. I don't know what they're worried about, though. I'm not really sure. We tried a medication for Parkinson. It cut off the top of the worries. And this is also maybe getting lost in translations too, by the way. We used medication for Parkinson's. It cut off the top of the worries, but it was still scaring her. More structure, I understand, but maybe even more boundaries create. What would you guys do? Maybe drugs would be appropriate here.
Interesting that that she has so many that have it. I sometimes go the opposite direction.
And what, right? Opposite from what? What do you mean?
So as she's saying, like tighten things down.
Yeah.
So it depends on how I could interpret the anxiety. So that's the hardest part about this, is that I can when she explains this in my mind, I can see an anxious dog, but that interpretation is hard sometimes unless I'm present in the environment to see what might be factors that are also affecting the anxiety. So for example, these are cases to me where this becomes very difficult to separate her recognition of the dementia leading to dogs having anxious symptoms due to her recognition and what it leads her to do, right? So this is what I mean by the interpretation of where the anxieties come from. Oftentimes when something like this happens, it changes how we interact with them to a degree that it would be hard to then separate where some of the behavior change is coming from. So there would be a lot of little things that I would look at in that. As far as medicines and stuff go, I would have to trust my vet. You know, that's you. If you trust your vet and they say these are some medicines we can try, when it gets to essentially end of life conditions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm going to be a little bit more flexible in things like that. That okay, let's try this, but I also have to look at quality of life. How long am I willing to make this dog confused for? And if I can see the dog, you know, I was at the vet yesterday. I told you about the dog tattooing my other dog. So we had to take that dog to the vet. And the conversation came up and he goes, "This is what I suggest." And I did a post on this, but this was fantastic because this is what I suggest. Get a calendar. And he goes, get a blue marker and a red marker. Blue marker's good day, red marker's bad day. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you know, mark on the calendar if it was a good day or a bad day from the, you know, what your perception is of a good day or a bad day for the dog. And he goes, and you'll just then see it. So then you'll kind of understand it. So
see the pattern.
Yeah. And see when the dog's having more basic, I guess you could say bad days than good. And so there's a lot, this one's really difficult to decipher. So I would take sometimes, that's what I mean by I sometimes would do less. I would sometimes pull back and go, I'm going to not even outside of giving a pill to this thing, I'm not even going to acknowledge it. I'm not going to act like it's here. And just to see if I can move the needle and alter the energy that potentially could be affecting things. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a vet and I wouldn't even know how to,
obvious disclosure.
Yeah. I wouldn't even know how to, diagnose or recognize dementia.
Right.
So, I mean, we have a dog who's 13, Luna, and, you know, she's starting to slow down quite a bit. She's had a couple seizures, probably 3 in the last 6 years or 4 in the last 6 years. And, you know, we kind of just, she doesn't have as much structure she used to. She doesn't go on walks because she can't go on long walks. She does go outside with us. She has more free range. She's the only dog.
That's kind of the point I was kind of leaning to too, is like a lot more. Here you go, man. Just
she is the one that sleeps in our room. She's on the side of the house that dogs are not allowed on, but she's allowed over there. I just came back on a road trip last weekend. I took her with me. She gets a little bit more, access more things that she gets to pass on a lot of things, but she's earned it. She deserved it. And
you know what I was thinking of, dude, too, as you're talking? When was the last time you went to the vet?
Well, the vet comes to my house, but
okay. So, there's a couple different vets I use, but as you're talking and I'm thinking about this, I'm like 4 cases. And this could be like I go back to where there's potential pattern exists. So if you take a 12 or 13-year-old dog to the vet today, they'll find dementia. And what I'm saying is I think just end of life or late stage life creaks and anxiety, like older dogging, you know what I'm saying? It's like they're anxious over some of the things that are getting older. I had 2 old clients one time. I'll never forget this. They wanted a dog because they had PTSD of getting older, just as being older people. I'll never forget that.
What?
Right? Exactly. They were like 75 years old and they're like, we have PTSD from getting older. I'm like, shit. All right.
That's inevitable. You can't.
Yeah, dude, let me put that away and put it someplace. But the point I'm making is that I was at the vet I had to go to 2 different vets yesterday with 2 different dogs. And one of them, I came home and I'm talking to my wife and I go, no matter what, they're going to find something, right? It's like anymore. And she goes, yeah, it's called evidence-based medicine. So they go in and they have to find something that they can then treat. So it's basically diagnostic based now. It seems like anytime there's what could be presented as a symptom, they're going to find a cause for the symptom, even if it's, your dog's 13 and it vibrates when it walks because it's fucking 13 and it's 13. Now, we could go into other things. This is a little side thing, is that depending on where you live, there's certain illnesses that can create that. Like the tick-borne stuff actually will have very, very, very similar symptoms. And so if you have a cluster of dogs that have that, I would look at that too. But to the first topic, if in fact it's just going to a vet that's sensitive to the way that dogs at end of life act, that alone can change how you interact with your dog. So I'd be curious to know the symptoms that are being attributed to their diagnosis of dementia and how much altered the dog seems from a year ago or 2 years ago. And I'd be able to, right now, obviously just speculating, not having her on here, and my brain can go with this shit. So,
by the way, it's funny we just brought up, like, they're going to find something. I remember I had a friend who he was like, oh, me and so-and-so broke up. I'm like, why? What happened? He's like, she went through my email. I'm like, oh, was there anything bad? He's like, no, but she was determined to find something, and she found just a conversation. It wasn't even nothing, but she was, in her mind, she saw it as me having a conversation. It was interpreted to completely different.
No shit, right? It's simple.
So they're going to find something. If you really want to find something, you'll find it, you know?
Yeah. So that's the way it is, though, you know? That's just human nature. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't, I see what you're saying, and it makes total sense. And, you know, the vet that comes to our house, we do like her, but there's also things that we don't like. Just, you know, pushing vaccines on a 13-year-old dog, you know, why not offer titer testing to see if she's still immune? Like, these are all of these things that now I know how to get titer testing, things like that, because after all these years, she's still immune to the rabies because she's had it. Why do they need to get it again? You know, they keep pushing all these things, which kind of annoys me.
It's almost indoctrinating in certain aspects, because no matter who you're talking to, they're coming at you the same. Dude, from what I understand, some of those vaccines can last infinitely longer than needed to be given. And so why not take that route? It's amazing to me that they will always tell you to vaccinate before they'll tell you to titer test. Come on, can we just meet in the middle? Let's do it.
Do you want to hear something crazy? I knew someone that had like a dog that was 14 years old, 15 years old, was end of life. They took the dog to the vet to put it down, and they said, "We need to vaccinate your dog first."
Shut the fuck up.
Yep. Can you imagine? That is insane. Like, I was blown. What was
it, a COVID vaccine? We got to get your dog a COVID vaccine. All right, now we're good.
Now,
fuck.
COVID vaccine. Now we're screwed. Just kidding. But yeah, isn't that crazy? Like, they would not put their dog down unless the dog.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to mute that out, huh? That one, just the word in here.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks a lot, Todd. It's all good. All right, this was fun, man. Like, I obviously there's more questions we probably can get to, but I'm really excited to see you in California. We're gonna have some guests that we're gonna be interviewing in California, which we're excited to do. And wow, there's a spider just crawled right down right now, right next to me. But yeah, I'm excited to get in California and get some more interviews done. I'm really excited to see you again, catch up with you again.
Hypothetically speaking, those who are listening, if you could ask Cesar a question, what would it be? So text or leave a comment of what you would want to ask him about anything.
Hypothetically speaking, if we could get him on the podcast, what would you ask him?
What would you ask him?
Yeah.
All right, brother. I will see you tomorrow.
Right there.